Happy Tuesday. I hope that you guys caught last week's episode with Dr. Temi, the Money Mindset MD, and I hope that you looked up her Instagram or her Facebook and are now following her for monetary wealth development and building. We covered imposter syndrome, we covered negotiation, we covered wealth building. Overall, the episode was just pure fire. Such a good time. I'm definitely going to have her come back. You guys know I started this podcast because, like many of you, I want to shift the way that the culture of medicine is progressing. And so I was reading this story on Facebook about a retail pharmacist for CVS who was on shift one day and started experiencing symptoms that she realized could potentially be a heart attack. And so she's texting her boyfriend about it. And he was asking, should I come pick you up? Should we go to the ER? What do you want to do? And she said, okay, well, let me figure out work stuff first. Let me find someone to cover me. I'm the only one here. So she was in communication with her bosses about trying to find coverage so that she could leave the pharmacy. And by the time they secured coverage, and someone was en route so that she could leave and go to the ER, she collapsed on the floor of the pharmacy and died. She died, y'all. The article talked about the current culture of retail pharmacy, about the fact that the workforce continues to decrease and the workload continues to increase, especially post-COVID. So retail pharmacists, as we know, not just handle prescriptions, but they are required to do vaccines and patient education, amongst a list of other tasks, while working longer hours alone. They talked about the stress of this woman in particular, but they started off by saying how she was recognized during training as this hard worker who always went above and beyond. And I just immediately thought she's basically like so many of us, the kind of person who's dedicated to their job, constantly getting praised for working really hard, even to their own detriment. I think you recognize her. I started thinking about who I was before medicine versus who I became after, because I think many of us start off as the kind of individuals who are really strong. We're goal driven, we're persevering, but also we have a certain personality trait that allows us to ignore deterrence from our path. I remember as like a teenager, an early 20 something, that I was putting myself first. And so it's interesting to become this person at this point in my career who is now relearning how to put myself first. It signifies that I lost it at some point. How did I start off as the girl who would stop at nothing to accomplish her goals and come out the woman who's afraid to ask for what she wanted? It's so gradual, it's sneaky. I remember being in college and making plans for my medical school applications. Honestly, I think it's a blessing that we don't always know what medical culture is like. I think, especially as a first generation doctor in this country, I had no context. I didn't know many doctors, I didn't have many people to speak to. I didn't really understand what being a doctor truly meant. So, on the rare occasion when I did speak to a doctor, they were telling me that I shouldn't go into medicine, how the culture was shifting. They were trying to warn me. But every time they said that to me, I heard that they were telling me that they didn't think I could do it, which is an entirely different message. And so I was set on proving everyone wrong. I also think it helps not having the full picture at the start because ignorance is bliss in that way. I didn't know what I didn't know. All I considered was completing the step immediately in front of me. And I think that that is actually a positive because if you only consider the thing in front of you, it stops you from getting overwhelmed in a way that impedes your progress. So all I did when I was trying to figure out how to apply to med school was, okay, I got to take the MCAT. So I solely focused on studying for the MCAT. After the MCAT, I worried about applications. I didn't know anything about USMLE exams. I didn't know there was a step one. a step two, and I definitely did not know about step three. In fact, I don't think I knew about step three until I was already halfway through medical school. I think I got through training simply by focusing on the immediacy of things. But to come out on the other side as someone who has imposter syndrome after having done all of this work and proving myself just indicates to me that there's a subculture in medicine, a psychology that was occurring that I wasn't paying attention to and I didn't know how to address or combat. I completed medical school after being told by my college advisor and probably others that I would never even get into medical school. You would think that that would make me come out more confident, but instead I came out less confident. I had so much more doubt than when I went in after having completed something that people say is really difficult and hard to do. So I'm trying to examine where those kinds of beliefs and thoughts came from. You know, we love to get to the root of things. We have an investigative mind as physicians. I think back to the first time that I felt true doubt after getting into Caribbean medical schools, which, by the way, I was really excited about getting in. But the first week on campus in Grenada, I realized that people only came to the Caribbean if they couldn't get into US schools. Now, me, being of Caribbean heritage, I had thought that this was going to be this amazing adventure. I remember previous years where I had wanted to move to the Caribbean. And I expressed this to my mom, and she was like, well, what are you going to go down there and do? And so to me, the opportunity to go and study medicine, which is a huge goal, big accomplishment, everybody praises you for this venture you're about to start on. And I got to do it in the Caribbean. It was the perfect solution. I'm accomplishing this huge goal and simultaneously getting to experience the Caribbean firsthand, which is something as a first generation American, you don't always get to do. You don't always get to live in the country of your origin. And obviously, the term origin is lightly used because colonialism, and the Caribbean is really not truly our place of origin. But anyway, I hadn't gotten into an American school. But prior to talking to these other students, I hadn't thought that that wasn't an insult. I just saw some of these schools as elitist institutions, and I didn't really care about their metrics. To me, I hadn't known what was required to get into medical school. Like I said, my advisor was a POS. So the fact that I was still able to pull this off, having changed my major senior year from exercise science to pre-med, having taken organic chemistry over a summer just to pass it, I felt good. And then the doubt creeped in. I remember getting the email saying I was accepted to my first Caribbean medical school, and my joy was derived from the fact that at that point, I knew that I was going to be a doctor. I hadn't received the rest of the acceptances yet or all the American rejections yet, but even just that one acceptance, I was thrilled because in my mind, I was Dr. Horn. Realizing that people were going to see me as less than for going to a Caribbean medical school was one of the first seeds of doubt. Despite the curriculum being equally or more rigorous, despite the fact that I was moving to another country, sight unseen, to undergo this rigorous program, people were going to judge me for following what honestly was probably a slightly harder path. My next blow was our first exams in our first semester. We had this exams called the Unifieds that tested all three subjects, and it was a marker of how well we'd been studying up to that point. I guess it was supposed to be a marker. And I failed the biochemistry portion of that exam, and I think I barely skated to the other two portions. And I think that that might have been the first time I realized that even the school didn't expect all of us to thrive and survive. I don't know that I had been up until that point in a school setting where they had not prepared us to be successful. I went to this prestigious Brooklyn high school, middle school, high school, full of rich people, and you know their parents do not stand for anything less than college acceptance at top institutions. I went to an equally ritzy college full of rich people, and I think the expectation was the same. You're supposed to graduate on time. You're supposed to create these great connections. You're supposed to get a successful job, whatever that looks like. Medical school was the first educational setting where I could see that they dealt with failure on a regular basis and not in a way that's, let's support you through this. Let's help you get through this. It felt very much like the weeding out process that it was. And I think that weeding out process continues in medicine almost into perpetuity. The fact that we continue to take exam after exam, and that is the measure of our success, that's the measure of our worth, is very harmful. I think it's a driver of imposter syndrome for many of us. A friend of mine, after taking her subspecialty boards, was really blown away by the fact that the test felt very, very difficult. Because after school, after residency, after fellowship, she found herself asking, why are they still trying to weed us out? The culture is such that instead of making anyone feel like they've made it, we continue to feel like we have something to prove forever. We continue to feel that we're one step away from failing. And we wonder if everyone around us can also see that. Imposter syndrome is what leads us to taking jobs and working in jobs until we drop dead. It leads physicians to commit suicide. It's the feeling that we have to constantly prove ourselves by working harder and doing more, by minimizing our own health and our needs, ignoring signs from our bodies. And the reinforcement that comes from being chosen for a job, the honor that we feel, the gratitude. I've heard so many physicians express this sentiment for being allowed to do the thing that we have spent half our lives training to do. This just lets me know how off the mark the culture is. Those feelings of gratitude, those feelings also of unworthiness make it really difficult to want to speak up, to want to ruffle feathers. Spending years of trying to get into medicine, trying to get into residency, trying to get into fellowship, trying to get an attending position influences how we show up in each of those spaces. I think the solutions that many doctors are coming up with, my solution being negotiation, is actually what's going to save us. But in order to negotiate, you have to be convinced of your value. You have to be convinced that something's worth fighting for and that you're the person to fight for it. Sometimes that's a hard sell with doctors because of our training backgrounds, because of our traumas. Residency is a masterclass in how to put the needs of a system in front of our own and being rewarded for that. I remember one call I had in the NICU. NICU call started at 7 a.m. So I arrived at 7. Well, I arrived before 7, changed into my scrubs, got ready for rounds. I had to finish writing my notes before noon so the attending could sign it while simultaneously answering calls from NICU nurses, intermediate nursery, well baby newborn nursery, and attending all the high risk deliveries, all the C-sections, plus placing orders for all of those babies in all of those units, plus speaking to parents. And I was the only one on call. I was alone. So despite coming in at 7, it was 9 p.m. when I first entered the call room, which is immediately next door to the NICU. It's not that it was far. And at 9 p.m. was when I was putting that first bite of my sandwich in my mouth. And the phone rang, y'all. It was another nurse with another request. At that moment, sitting on the edge of a twin bed with a 12-hour-old sandwich, or more than that, 14-hour-old sandwich, tears of frustration literally came out of my eyes. I just wanted to sit and have 5 minutes to eat a sandwich and go to the bathroom. And I couldn't have that. While it's unreasonable to ask someone to manage 60 plus newborns, many of them being very ill newborns, high acuity newborns, plus however many staff, nurses, MAs that have access to me. That's so unreasonable, but it was the status quo. So there's the duality of feelings where I realized that the demand is ridiculous, but simultaneously I feel inadequate, that I am struggling to do this while so many other people do and have done this exact job. There's a sentiment that if I'm not able to accomplish this, I'm not worthy. It's a system of constant negative reinforcement. If you are ill and want to do something for yourself, they want you to sacrifice yourself in any way, shape, or form to the benefit of others. As a pediatrician, I always joke about how I don't get sick anymore because all the kids have shared all their germs with me. I've exposed myself to every illness probably through direct inoculation. Pre-COVID, when I wasn't wearing masks in clinic, I remember demonstrating to kids how to say ah. So I would open my own mouth, stick out my own tongue, and go ah to show them what to do. And at that exact moment, having those kids cough directly into my open mouth and just having the droplets fall onto my tongue, gross. But I always joke that that's what built my immune system and why my immune system is impenetrable. On the way, though, to building that immune system in residency, the first year of residency to me is like the first year of your kid in daycare. Like you get all the things. I remember specific times still where I did get sick. Intern year, some point in intern year, I definitely had the flu. I still showed up on that Monday and was trying to make it through rounds, but my body had so much fatigue. I almost thought I was going to pass out, and I could not hold my body up. I had to ask several times if I could just sit down. At some point, I started taking like one of those rolling chairs from the nurse's station so that I could sit down when it wasn't my turn to present a patient. My attending at the time, which was one of our only Black female attendings, actually told me that I needed to go home. And I argued with her because I had my continuity clinic that afternoon. There was already a full schedule of patients that I needed to see, and I didn't think I could miss it. I remember her reassuring me that she would speak to my continuity attending and let her know that I was sick, but I really needed to go home. So, part of me was relieved and I also felt guilty, but part of me was relieved because I really did need to go home and lay down. And I'm pretty sure I immediately fell asleep upon getting home. But I remember afterwards speaking to my continuity attending about having missed clinic, and she was clearly not happy that I went home sick because it meant that she had to see all of the patients that were on my panel and write all the notes. I don't remember what she said. I just remember the feeling. And I carried that feeling, that disapproval with me throughout residency. Once, I want to say it was third year of residency, my last year of residency, I had to have emergency surgery and I was admitted to my own hospital, the hospital where I was working, had a procedure overnight and was Sunday night and was in the hospital on that Monday. And so naturally I was missing again continuity clinic. Might have been like the third time I missed continuity clinic in 3 years. And my attending texted me why I wasn't in clinic. And I let her know, well, I'm actually admitted to the hospital, and the chief residents should have let her know that I wasn't going to be in clinic. And her response was that they never told her. And rather than being thrown off or sympathetic about the fact that I was in the hospital for emergency procedure, I just remember her disappointment. And I think also I attributed it to the disappointment of having had to miss clinic at least 2 times prior for health reasons. One was after I got an IUD and I had such bad cramping, I could not walk, and her being irritated, just displeased. All of these instances are what create the doctor who comes out of a training program and realizes that in order to please others, they must self-sacrifice, that is the expectation. It results in the pharmacists who collapse in the middle of a retail pharmacy despite having warning symptoms of a heart attack. People always talk about the journey, but the journey could be your success story or it could be your villain origin story. It's not something that happens in one day with the flip of a switch. It's gradual over time. And then there's other secondary effects to the culture of medicine. The primary being this learning of self-sacrifice. The secondary is that when you find yourself unworthy, is that you often find other people unworthy as well. And the trauma response is that you think that if you want something done, you have to be the one to do it. You have to do it yourself. This is the attitude that makes us struggle even more to walk away from a work environment. This pharmacist expressed the concept that she was the only one who was going to take care of the pharmacy. I hear this a lot in conversation with other doctors. If I'm not there, who's going to take care of my patients? Doctors feel more for their patients than they do feel for themselves. I remember thinking, well, I could cope. I could figure out how to cope with my illness, but how will the patients cope with not being seen for their illnesses? Seeing everyone else as both inadequate and as a victim instead of as creators of their own life, their own experience, because I myself did not feel like a creator of my experience. It's debilitating. I also felt like the victim of happenstance, and that's what I thought about everyone else. Imposter syndrome is worsened by accepting the status quo, particularly this status quo that doesn't align with our personal values. We replicate success based on what we see and not what feels intrinsically good. It's not based on our priorities, but on what others have told us is a measure of success. When I was that resident in NICU, my measure of success was making it through a 28 to 30-hour shift and not dropping any of the balls I was juggling. The measure of success was not necessarily how well I took care of myself, but it was how well I was able to take care of everyone else. And all these cases of success are defined by someone else. Pleasing my employers, my supervisors, my attendings, the nurses, everyone except me. It's also why negotiation feels so foreign. I spent years trying to predict what would make my attendings happy, what would make the nurses happy, and not spending any time understanding what happy meant to me. So much so that everyone else's voice was louder than my own. I find this a lot with many physicians when I'm talking about my coaching program and when we're talking about what they want for themselves. They're afraid to say what they want, or they don't know how to define success other than what's been laid out for them. Like the way our training has been laid out for us, residency has been laid out. All of our steps have been in a set path created by someone else for years. But in order to negotiate, you have to know what you want and be willing to ask for it. And that is not often a voice people are familiar with. I remember not even considering asking for what I wanted. It was always all about what I thought someone else wanted. So just thinking about negotiation in a really general sense, I could not imagine me being a successful negotiator because that voice didn't sound anything like my own voice. If you're used to being a go along to get along kind of person, playing what we call hardball negotiation, that firm, stick to your guns, no holds barred negotiation can cause so much cognitive dissonance because it doesn't feel like us. And as people pleasers, we're used to taking what's given to us. We're used to giving in. The first sign of a struggle or discomfort or disappointment from another person causes us to just relinquish whatever it is we were asking for. I think with people who feel like they're more passive, there may be a quieter personality, an introverted personality. The consideration of that kind of negotiation, of being a hard negotiator, causes a lot of discomfort because it feels foreign. It's not a language they're used to speaking. I think the same thing happens if you're a firecracker personality. The concept of having to give in to something, knowing you asked for something else, also causes discomfort. If in every other area of your life, you're used to being in charge and to being vocal, the concept of entering a conversation in which you are expected to just comply creates inner turmoil. You'll find that physicians, regardless as to whether they're more passive or more assertive, will just avoid the negotiation experience for a variety of discomfort. When I started negotiating, I thought I was going to use my assertive parts of my personality to say what I wanted and that I was going to get what I wanted by any means necessary. So I was willing to walk away. I mean, frankly, I was willing to quit medicine as a whole. So at that point, I just thought, my presence is your present. And that's where I derived my leverage. But as I continued to learn and study the art of negotiation and understand good negotiation techniques, I realized that good negotiation is not reliant on personality. So it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted. It doesn't matter if you want to play softball or hardball. Actually, those techniques don't work. Um, doesn't matter if you're known to be a people pleaser or a compromiser. You can negotiate in a way that feels collaborative instead of combative. I also think that good negotiation does not have to trigger all of your traumas. And for me, as someone who has a lot of traumas from medicine, as I previously described, like this creation of doubt through training, the failure to meet the status quo, the constant self-sacrifice that I learned, if I could figure out a way to negotiate that was not triggering to me, then this was a method that I felt would work in all physicians. If we as physicians learn how to decipher our dreams, also decide what they are, decide that we're worthy of them, and ask for them, then that shift will create a change in the status quo, which then creates a newer culture of medicine, a healthier culture of medicine. People ask me about negotiation all the time, and they want a quick answer, or they want me to answer via text message or a phone call. And I offer them my program because it is not just telling you, you should say this or you should ask for that. It is in helping you decide what are your dreams, helping you realize that you are, in fact, worthy of them, and then teaching you how to ask for them. That can't be done in a call. And I find that when I had those conversations in the past where I told people, what they should ask for, when they were not able to get it, it just caused a worse discomfort. They felt even worse about themselves because they were not able to do the thing that they felt they needed. They were betraying themselves. And that is a hard feeling and a different type of trauma. So I think people probably now might get upset that I don't always answer questions off hat just about negotiation, or I don't just give them quick answers. But it's because I understand the psychology of it is just so much deeper than me telling you what to do or what to say. The goal of learning the skill of negotiation is that you get to create the kind of work environment where no one has to collapse at work from a heart attack because they were waiting for someone else to cover them. No one has to be choosing between working and life. So from this place, from this drive, that is where I coach from. It's because I want more for myself. I want more for you. I want more for the entire community of Black doctors. I want to offer you every week the opportunity to join my coaching program because I teach doctors how to get what they want at work. And it is through realizing our dreams, thinking about how to live a soft life, how to truly do self-care, not bubble baths, not a one-off massage, but in self-advocacy, in being able to take off the days that you need to take off in order to care for yourself and your family without having to combat the inner turmoil it causes by not pleasing someone else, by setting up the kind of structure where it is assumed that you will take off and protect yourself rather than it being assumed that you're going to come in against your own self-interests. I teach you how to prioritize. I teach you how to live based on your actual dreams, your actual needs. And because of that, because we are willing to follow that path and to speak for ourselves, That is how we will see the culture change. So, if you are a Black physician, Black doctor, pharmacist, dentist, who realizes that what's happening in your life and your career is no longer in your best interests, and you're ready to unlearn the things that you were taught that are creating contradiction in your life. You actually want to live. You actually want to enjoy your life. You actually want to thrive and have a long life and maybe even a long career or not. I want you to book a call with me. I want you to get on a call. Let's figure this out now. Don't wait until you're having symptoms of a heart attack. Don't wait until you're so exhausted you are driving home half asleep. There are so many warning signs. There are so many things that pop up in our life that let us know that what we're doing is not sustainable. So let's get on a path to make your life sustainable. That pharmacist was in her early 40s. I think she was only 42. So don't think that you have time and that your health, she had gotten a clean bill of health from her physician. Obviously, they did not check for her atherosclerosis that was compiled on by stress, but I really want anyone who knows that they're ready to save themselves to book a call. I look forward to hearing from y'all. I want y'all to have a good week. Think about what I've said and take the next steps. Talk to you soon. Bye.